Hey guys, welcome back for more tutorials. My name is Magnet, and today let's talk about using Stargate builds in Protoss versus Protoss. I remember a long time ago this actually used to be kind of a foreign concept, but Stargate builds have really started to stabilize and be much more viable in PvP, and I really wanted to take some time to explain how they're supposed to work as far as the opener, how you're supposed to use the units that come out of the Stargate, and the different transitions that you can play afterward. So let's go ahead and jump into the game here. And we will press forward. Oh, I need to press the right button actually. So this is going to be Baby Knight versus Whelmu. And basically with Stargate openers, you have the advantage of being able to figure out what your opponent is doing faster than pretty much any other build. And you also have the advantage of getting into really hardcore unit counters. And you'll see what I mean once that comes up. So let's just fast forward to the point where this starts to come up. By the way, this is going to be double gas, or at least it should be for both players very quickly, and this is really normal in PvP. Typically, if you want to open Stargate, you will mine from 3 on each. That's going to get you a faster Stargate, but you can still go 2 on each if you wanted to get a little bit later one. So, you see the cores for both these players, nothing unusual so far. Now it's 3 out of 3 for Whelmu, and probably the same for Baby Knight as well. And to be honest, I don't remember which player actually opens up with the Stargate. I want to say it's Baby Knight, considering Whelmu is known a lot more for his DT play. So we'll have to see. And it looks like it is actually Whelmu opening up with the Stargate. And on the other side, Baby Knight is opening up with a Twilight Council. So this is very likely going to be Stargate versus Blink. And the most important thing with Stargate openers is you need to know what your opponent is doing as soon as possible, because your different transitions are going to mean a lot as far as how to respond to what they're doing. If they're opening up with Blink, then going for something like an Oracle doesn't really make sense, because they can chase it down and kill it really easily. It'll never pay for itself at that rate. So you kind of want to also temper your production off of your Stargate based upon what your opponent is doing. So if your opponent's doing something like Blink, defensive Void Ray makes a lot more sense. Phoenix can make sense just to figure out what's going on. Oracles really won't. If they're doing something like DTs, then Oracles make a lot more sense, because you will need the detection for the DTs. And a lot of times Oracles can do really well against DT builds if they decide to not get Blink afterwards. A lot of different things you need to be considering here. So let's watch how to play it out against Blink. So Stargate's on the way. He is producing Stalkers here just to be able to push off any sort of earlier type of attack. Does he even have a Mothership Core here? Yeah, he does. Okay, my bad. Mothership Core is definitely one of the very first units you want to get, and it will be Blink, and Whelmu is opening up with an Oracle here. So I want to state that opening up with a Phoenix first is much safer against basically anything, because you can fly that Phoenix in immediately and get the information that you want. It's only 100 gas, and it can continue to be useful throughout the game. Or opening up Oracle first is very risky, and Whelmu is even knowingly taking this risk, considering he knows what's going on here. This is his Mothership Core. He can recall this at any time, but he should know that this is Blink that he's facing. And any Oracles after this probably won't do a lot. I need to say though, in lower leagues, a lot of times people will forget to protect their mineral line with anything, so opening up with an Oracle first can be really strong as far as killing all their workers, because they won't have anything back at home a lot of the time. So it's very risk and reward based. If you want to play more safe, I would open up with a Phoenix first and fly it in there and see what's going on, and then produce something to respond to what they're doing. So in this case, if they were opening Blink, you'd probably produce a Void Ray, considering overcharging against Stalkers is really strong. And then obviously getting into a Robo for Immortals is going to be a much better transition. But the Oracle is very risky, very feast or famine, so it depends on what kind of player you are. Either way, after your first Stargate unit, you're probably going to want to start up a Robo anyway, like we were talking about. So he recalled his Mothership Core. He's starting a Robo. He knows that this is Blink. There's also the side possibility that this is DTs, so you will want to pay attention to what type of units they're producing. If they're making a lot of Stalkers, then obviously it will be Blink. But if they've stopped making those, and by the way, Void Ray is coming out now that he knows it is Blink, or rather can suspect it is Blink. Sending the Oracle in now just to double check. And if he sees a lot of Stalkers in here, this is going to tell him for sure. So he's going to go ahead and start up his Oracle here. You definitely want to kill as much as you can and keep it alive at basically all costs. He doesn't really know for sure, but I think these players are good enough to know that the speed of which these lights are flashing will indicate whether or not something is being researched, so he should know it's Blink by now. And since he knows it's Blink, he does have one Void Ray out. That's usually where you're going to stop. Then you're just going to start Immortals, and you're going to try to crawl your way out to an expansion. And again, if they ever leave their base, with enough stuff, which you can see there's really nothing here right now. So if they get too aggressive and too forward, this Oracle can still do quite a bit, but it still is a risk in the sense that you could pay 150 gas and have it do nothing at all. So just need to stress that that is definitely a risk. So right now he's just waiting on the edge of the overcharge, and note that he is warping in back at, or Baby Knight is warping in back at home, just because he knows that this is a possibility. By the way, you won't typically do a lot with force fields with blink. This is just going to make it so that the ones in the bottom can't blink forward. And here we go. The Oracle does have a handful of kills. 6 kills is really nice. But again, you could run into the risk of not doing anything with it all. So this is kind of a best case scenario type of situation. Either way, the transition will eventually be into Robo. And here's the thought process. Even if you open up with Phoenix, the thought process is that their way to counter flying units is probably going to be Stalkers this early in the game. So the obvious counter to Stalkers is going to be Immortals. So that's the whole progression that you're usually going to do with these Stargate openers. Is you're going to force out a lot of Stalkers, and then you're going to crush those Stalkers with a lot of Immortals. And that's a really, really common transition. You can go into things like Archon Immortal after this and just stay on a lot of Immortals, or you can go into Colossus. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Most importantly, I want to say that keeping on the Stargate production is going to be really hard to do. You'll die a lot to blink timings, you'll die a lot to different types of transitions, so don't get too attached to producing a lot of Stargate stuff once you've got your opener and your Nexus down. After this, Immortals are much better for cost, and the Stargate units just really won't typically do very well from that point on, assuming your opponent is more aggressive. If they're really passive and you can get a lot of Stargate units up, then yeah, it can work out, but that's still just kind of hoping that they screw up, and that you're not really relying on your ability or anything like that to win the game. So that's kind of a flimsy way of playing. Either way, once you have a few Immortals out in this Void Ray, enough gateway support and whatnot, you can start to take the space. And Whelmy's doing something really cool once again. He's producing another Oracle. This is for a lot of things. This can be to continually drop revelations on his army so you know where it is at all times, and especially against Blink this can get really annoying, considering they can snipe your observers, so you won't really know for sure if they have an observer with them. And they might be able to blink over here, they might be able to blink here, so continued revelations off an Oracle can be really good against this type of blink play. But secondarily, if they ever get lazy back at home and just figure, I have blink, I don't need to worry about it too much, and you can pair up your Oracles and keep them alive and harass really well, then that can give you a nice mid-game advantage that you otherwise might not have with this type of Stargate play. So again, you can see the Immortals, the Void Ray is really going to work as far as picking this apart. And an Immortal at the top of the ramp, more probes transferring. These Stalkers are just getting wasted right now. And this is the whole point of these Stargate openers, is to put them into units that are going to be terrible against your transition. So 3 Immortals. There's basically no number of Stalkers at this stage of the game that's ever going to beat 3 Immortals. Back over here, Oracle's still doing harassments. The second Oracle should be out somewhere. It looks like it was being rallied in a weird position. So yeah, so I mean, this is the basis of most Stargate openers, and especially against Blink and stuff that relies on a lot of Stalkers, this will be really strong if you transition appropriately. So just to review the basics is open up with Stargate. You can choose either Phoenix or an Oracle, and usually Phoenix is going to be a little more safe. Robo immediately after the first Stargate unit, and then figure out what they're doing and produce units that are going to make sense against what they're doing. So that's a basic overview of how to open up with Stargate. Let's take a look at a couple of other scenarios that can come up if you open Stargate and kind of explain the different things you're going to see. I did this in my last video too. I don't know what I'm doing today, but and I'm even in the wrong thing again. So let's take a look at another one. This is going to be the situation if you have to go up against Dark Templar. So it is a little bit similar to Blink, but the idea is that you can lift up their Dark Templar with Phoenix and with Oracles and just force them to just waste money off of those if they decide to go Dark Templar into Stargate. But you most importantly need to know what's going on with the DTs sooner rather than later. So in this game, Adonminus is going to be the player that opens up Stargate, and this guy is very up and coming actually. Did really well in a recent tournament and taking down a lot of really high level Koreans. So this guy might not seem very well known, but he's definitely going to be somebody to look out for in the future. By the way, double gas like we've talked about. You can go 3 on each if you really want to, so it looks like he wants to on this one, and again on the other one. So both of them mining 3 out of 3. Typically you're going to want to open up with a Mothership Core, but I believe this is one of those builds where he just goes straight to Stargate without doing anything else, and he even shows it to the pro. He doesn't care, because this type of super fast Stargate is going to be really safe against a lot of things, mainly because you can fly a Phoenix in there immediately and you can see what's going on faster than any other build would allow you to. So he's going to go immediate Stargate, he's going to show it to the probe, he's going to start a Mothership Core and start Warp Gate right afterward. And the first unit on this almost always has to be a Phoenix, because they're going to know that if you open Stargate, Oracle can be a threat, and if you fly an Oracle in there, and they already know it's coming, that won't do much. But the Phoenix is really just to scout, and sometimes you can actually kill their Mothership Core with it. So that's kind of the idea here. So Hasawab's going for a Dark Shrine, as we can see there. Phoenix is going to come in here and see everything, though. You can usually produce a second Phoenix, but most importantly, you need to get that Robo transition down pretty fast. This is one of the things I really don't like about his build, is it would probably be better just to wait on this second Phoenix and use the money on a Robo instead, and then start the Phoenix up once you know what's going on. Or maybe starting up the Oracle if you need a really fast detection. He doesn't really know everything that's going on here, so he's being a little bit too greedy trying to kill this Mothership Core, but he will figure it out sooner rather than later. And the Phoenix can resist a lot of shots here from Stalkers and stuff. There we go, now he knows. So he knows that he definitely needs to get an Oracle out with this. And you can keep your Oracles and your Phoenix together back at your base. So if they try to run any DTs in, you just pick them up with your Phoenix and you laugh while they die. Especially, I mean, you definitely do need to turn on the detection on your Oracle, but all that is fairly self-explanatory. He's adding on the Robo now, both players are, that is. The DT build is getting a little bit faster in Nexus, so that's one of the kind of the downsides of DT builds. They usually will expand faster than you. But now that he has this trio of units here, 2 Phoenix and an Oracle, DTs should do absolutely 0 damage, and that's one of the big benefits of this, is that they'll have a hard time doing anything against that. Tricky pylon placement here from Hasawabs, and once Indominus figures out what's going on here, which he's actually taking a while to figure out what's going on here, he should eventually clean this up. So he's going to lose a couple of probes here, but if he was paying a little bit more attention, then he should be a lot better as far as holding this off. He turns on the Oracle's detection, lifts up the DT, and now it's not going to do anything. Unfortunately, it did kill a few workers, but after this, if the DT player simply expands, you can go ahead and go up to about 4 Phoenix and continue to harass with those Phoenix and continue to force them to produce Stalkers to stop that harass. So even though he lost a few workers here, 6 workers, he can easily make those up with Phoenix harass as the game goes on. And this turns into a really long game here, and we'll kind of take a look at the transitions from both of these guys once they start to come up. You can see the Robo finally coming up here for Indominus. That's such a hard name to say, but that's his in some version or another. So he still does have these Phoenix out though, and just picking off a handful of probes. You'll notice that he's only sticking on 3. That's okay. You can go up to 4, you can go up to even 5 in very rare circumstances, but beyond that, there's really no reason to continue to produce them unless they give you a reason, like they're trying to make their own Phoenix, or they're making Void Rays or something weird like that. Then you can continue the production, but transitioning into Blink is very common after DTs, especially against Stargate. So while the Phoenix will occasionally kill probes here and there, they won't be a game-ending type of force. But most importantly is forcing them to make these Stalkers. So once again, you can transition into Robo and into Immortal and whatnot to really stomp out these Stalkers pretty hard. So from here, let's continue to watch a little bit to see what... Just continue to see what his transitions are after this, whether it's going to be Archon Immortal or whether it's going to be Colossus, because both transitions are viable. But most importantly, note that his Stargate is basically idle for the rest of the game after this point, unless he wants to start it up for Tempest or something later if he starts to fight against Colossus builds. So up comes the Stalkers trying to do a little bit of aggression here. I think Indominus was being a little bit lazy about producing Immortals, so he might have a little bit of trouble, but still, this is plenty as far as holding off these attacks. And if there's nothing back at home, the Phoenix, every one of these lifts can represent a probe kill, and he can get pretty far ahead as far as in the probe kill game if he continues to stay on top of that. By the way, he's adding on a Twilight Council. He'll eventually be adding on a Templar Archives. I think this is going to be Archon Immortal to go into the later stages of the game. But if you stay diligent with these Phoenix and you can get worker kills with them, that'll give you that mid-game advantage that you really want in PvP, especially if they throw away units like this. And I think this is partially Hasawabs knowing that he's not going to be able to do much with these Stalkers, so you might as well get the best trade you can. So both these players playing it out really well, and that'll at least break down the opener against DTs. Let's take a look at one more. And this might be the most frustrating part of Stargate openers, and that is going against other Stargate openers and the ways you can kind of break those stalemates. So, see the third Stargate game here. This is Deer versus Zest, And this was a great game to learn different ways to transition off of Phoenix versus Phoenix especially. So, and that's definitely what you're going to see, and that's what these are going to break down to. So, whoops, I'm pressing the wrong buttons. I'm just messing up all over the place today. I don't know what my problem is, but I'm just like Derp Mode 2000 here. So both players opening up, they're going to open up very normal, as we can see, nothing too crazy. Again, the timing of the Stargate is really up to you and what you feel most safe with. I would say the immediate Stargate after your core finishes is probably the safest one, quote-unquote, but that has a lot of rigid components to it that some people don't like. So if you can really get away with it, I'd say immediate Stargate is probably the stronger, especially if you get into these Stargate versus Stargate situations, because you might get a situation where you're ahead on Phoenix because your Stargate was a little quicker. So that's definitely what we're going to possibly see here from one of these two guys, is the immediate Stargate. And it's going to be from Zest. So Zest goes immediate Stargate. Deer's going to open up with a Mothership Core and a Sentry, so he's going to play this much more safely, and then eventually get his Stargate down. But Zest will have a little bit of an advantage in the Phoenix count, because his Stargate's going to be almost done by the time Deer's just barely getting started. So Zest doing the build we saw from last game, Deer's doing something a little differently. This is also why opening Phoenix is a lot safer, because if you both have this fast of a Stargate, and you open up Oracle and he opens up Phoenix, then all of a sudden you are a million miles behind. And don't ever underestimate the power of mirror Phoenix builds and somebody getting an advantage in that, because if you win a Phoenix versus Phoenix fight, then the game is over. There's no way you should really lose from that point. So the Phoenix versus Phoenix battles are very, very top heavy. They topple really quickly, and whoever has the slightest of advantages gains an enormous advantage throughout the rest of the game. So we can see that the Phoenix comes in here to figure out what's going on. It's going to see the Stargate, and he knows about this faster than Deer does. He can go ahead and send this Phoenix home. And now they both know from this point that it is Phoenix versus Phoenix. So don't ever underestimate the power of Phoenix if you have about 20 of them in PvP. And that's typically what this will break down to if it's Stargate versus Stargate, is both players will need to stay on Phoenix for a long time and try to just outdo each other in that type of situation. So if you get into that situation where both players can do nothing but produce only Phoenix, then you need to figure out a way to break that stalemate. And the way to break it can either be a faster second Stargate and getting more Phoenix and winning that way. You can try to get Phoenix range and just outrange your opponent's Phoenix and win that way. You can also go for air armor, which sounds funny because you would normally think air attack, but air attack actually doesn't really do anything in Phoenix versus Phoenix. So if you want to really get anything, air armor is a little bit better, but even that's kind of not the greatest play ever. You might actually just want to get a forage and go for shields instead. But there's also the ability that once you know it's Phoenix versus Phoenix, you can transition into just a boatload of Stalkers and try to win it that way. It's a little bit more hard to do, and you kind of have to disguise it for quite a while, but that's also a viable way to do it. So, saw Zest starting a robo here as he normally would. He just cancels it because he realizes that both players are just going to have to produce Phoenix, and that's what we're going to see on the production tab here for the next like 6 or 7 minutes. It's going to be basically only Phoenix production, and there's a reason people do this, and they do this because if you ever win that, then you have 20 Phoenix, you can lift up whatever you want and win the game. So it's pretty silly, but that can definitely happen. So Zest is going to go for the Phoenix range way to break this, whereas Deer is going to do something a little differently. He's going to go for a Twilight Council eventually, and he's going to make it look like he's staying on Phoenix and try and convince Zest that he has the advantage. By the way, this little hallucination of a Phoenix in here is really cool, because if they waste a lot of shots on that and you get a Phoenix lead because of it, then that can spiral out of control. I've seen that happen before, so cool little plays like the hallucinated Phoenix being mixed in with the regular Phoenix and leading the charge with the hallucinated one is really cool. Basically nullifies some Phoenix shots for a little while. And it won't be too consequential here because the overcharge will basically negate all the lead that the hallucination would have given. But at the same time, if you check out the Phoenix count, it's 5 versus 5, whereas Zest was consistently about 1 Phoenix ahead throughout it. So it seems silly, but that stuff can work. Here's the transition here from Deer. He's starting up a Twilight Council and a Forge, but he's going to continue to produce Phoenix, and he's going to try to make Zest believe that it's going to be Phoenix versus Phoenix for the long term. But the faster you make this transition out of it, the more of a chance you're going to have of winning a game like this. So Deer is basically just going to sit in his base. He's going to keep producing Phoenix one at a time, while Zest continues to do the same, but Zest is going to be much more reliant on winning the Phoenix War, Whereas Deer's not going to care as much. So Zest adds on the second Stargate. He's thinking, yeah, this is going to be Phoenix versus Phoenix for sure. And Deer is thinking, you know what, if I can get Blink, if I can get +1, maybe I can just kill him with the timing. And he'll think that it's still going to be Phoenix versus Phoenix and have way too many to the point where it's not going to matter because I'm just going to have too many Stalkers. So both of them are continuing to add on Phoenix here, but once the Blink finishes up and once these extra gateways finish up, this is when Deer is going to start thinking about pushing across the map and kind of punishing Zest for not really having the tools to deal with this many Blink Stalkers. But most importantly to note is that Deer's just sitting in his base here. He's just sitting in his base behind Phoenix and behind Stalkers, while Zest is trying to be a little bit more aggressive. So Zest doesn't really know this transition is underway, and he produces a lot more Phoenix than he should, considering the circumstance, and that's the reason Deer is able to eventually pick up this game. We can see this in the next few minutes. Once he has Blink about to finish up, he can move out with his Phoenix here, and the rest of his spending is going to be on Stalkers, and he's going to rely on the fact that if you spend lifts to deal with my Stalkers, and my Phoenix will still be enough to kill your Phoenix, and there's just going to be so many Stalkers here that you won't have enough Phoenix to lift them all up and kill them in time. If this were the other way around, and both players were both going for a ton of Phoenix and only maybe a handful of Stalkers, then once the Phoenix battles got out of control, if it was like, if you had 15 Phoenix left over against 0, which is very possible, then there could be enough Phoenix just to lift up the rest of the entire army and kill it that way. But I don't want you to get confused by saying that gateway units are the only way to break these, because if you get into Phoenix versus Phoenix and you're both committing heavily to it and you lose that Phoenix fight, then you're dead. There's no other way to say it. You're dead, and you should be dead unless your opponent messes up. So a lot of Stalkers and stuff moving across the field. Zest is going to come back in here and realize there's nothing here, so he's going to start spending lifts to try and kill probes. And on one hand this is good for Zest, but on the other hand it's bad because he's going to lose a lot of time with the overcharge and the Phoenix not being present. Note how Deer is just waiting for Zest Phoenix to come back so he can start to kill them that way. And because Zest doesn't have a viable transition here and there's so many Phoenix, and still an okay amount for Deer, about 8, there won't be enough lifts here to eventually end this fight, but it'll look funny for a little while. Deer just basically needs to warp in nothing but Stalkers from this point and just hope that he can win, and that Zest doesn't have enough to hold this off, and that's kind of all he can really do. So making a lot of Phoenix right now, or rather making a lot of Stalkers. The Phoenix are going to come in here and try to lift their best, at least once they win the Phoenix War, which they definitely will because they have range and Deer does not. He's going to start to lift as much as he possibly can, but there's just too many Stalkers here. Even if he were to spend every Phoenix lifting stuff, there's just too much stuff left over. This is way too many Stalkers. This is what, 16, 22 Stalkers, and there's just only a handful of Stalkers left from Zest. So this eventually will go into Deer's favor, and the point I wanted to make here is if you want to transition off of Phoenix, the faster and more aggressive you do, the better chance you're going to have of winning. So you can't just kind of dilly-dally around and do whatever. You have to commit one way or another, and you have to commit really hard. And if you're able to commit properly and at the right time, then you will win games kind of like this. So I hope you guys enjoyed those videos, or rather those replays. And I will be back with more videos. There's more Protoss tutorials down in the description of the video if you want to check that out, and you can leave comments if you have any questions or anything. So I'll be back with more very soon, and check that out. I will see you guys later.